Hi, everybody. It's Bob Ost, and it's Friday. It's July 28th. Uh, this is the TRU Community Gathering. For those of you who don't know us, Theater Resources Unlimited is an organization I founded 30 years ago, and we're dedicated to providing networking opportunities as well as educational opportunities and support for people in theater, specifically producers, but everybody in theater who would sort of benefit from understanding the business of theater. We teach people how to navigate the business of theater. We're happy to do these community gatherings now. We started them in April 17th, 2020, as a response to COVID. I always have been doing all my programming live. It always had been for like 27 years. I've been live. But what happened was something called COVID and shutdown. And I was like faced with the, what am I going to do? How am I going to run my programs? And somebody told me about Zoom, and I told them I didn't want to know about it, but they convinced me that I should listen. And then I sort of reached out to a lot of people here in the room and a lot of people in the TRU community. I said, we can't go anywhere. We have to stay in our apartments. We're all going a little stir crazy. We're all going a little nuts. How about if I open up a Zoom room and we meet every Friday and just talk about what we're up to and what we're doing? And I got a pretty unanimous yay, let's do that. So I started April 17th, and this, I'm happy and bewildered to say, is our 166th consecutive week of community gatherings. In addition to getting people together and feeling less isolated, we've also been having guests every week for 166 weeks to talk about theater. Early on, we were talking about how to survive a pandemic and how to not go crazy. And we've made advances. COVID is no longer considered a dire threat. It's been relieved of mask mandates, and it's been relieved of forced sheltering and social distancing and all that. We're now back to normal or something resembling normal. That said, I've had COVID 4 times, including 2 weeks ago. So it's still here, but at least it's not as much of a dire threat as it used to be. I still ask everybody to be conscious and considerate of people who might be more vulnerable than you. But it's kind of nice to be able to go out again. And it's also nice to be able to talk about things that are not related to surviving a shutdown. So I've got 2 guests. Actually, I've had both of them on over the past 3 years for very different conversations. I had Anne Hamburger on, I think 2 years ago, and also Anita on separately. And after having them both on, I found out that they actually know each other and that Anita and Anne worked together once upon a time. So I thought, well, they were both great guests. How much greater would it be to have them both on together? So I'm going to bring them in right now. I want you to meet Anne Hamburger, who's the executive artistic director of En Garde. Well, is that the right title? Of En Garde Arts. And Anita Durst, who created, she had a, I had this brainstorm called TRU. She had this brainstorm called ChaShaMa, like ages and ages ago now. I mean, and it's kind of a legendary kind of opportunity in our city. So it's really become a part of our cultural landscape. So let's see. Let me start with Anita. Anita, talk a little bit about your background and what you do, and tell us how it is that you know Anne.
Absolutely. Crowbar, we did Crowbar at the Victory Theater on 42nd Street. Richard Caliban, the Cucaracha Theater, were the producers and the director were part of it. Yep.
I do remember that. Oh gosh. Yeah. Okay.
And I don't know. I think Anne was the producer. I'm not sure, but yeah. So we did a beautiful production where the audience sat on the stage and we used the whole theater, and it was, this beautiful old theater on 42nd Street, and we were the ghosts and walking around the theater.
And what were we saying, Anita?
Time
All
is
theaters are
empty air.
haunted.
All theaters are
Theaters are
haunted.
haunted.
Yep, exactly.
Well, that's a truism, of course. Of course they are.
Hmm.
So at that point, Anne, were you producing independently, or was En Garde?
No, I founded En Garde in '85. And yeah, I was the producer on Crowbar and En Garde. Richard Caliban was the director, though he did have his own theater company called Cucaracha. That was wonderful. And Anita, in addition to being in the cast, was also my intern.
True.
Yeah, and of course now people say to me, "Everybody was your intern." Diane
I
Collins
wasn't.
was my
How
intern.
did I miss? How did I miss out?
When
Anne?
you get to be my age, there's a lot of interns that you can kind of say, "Oh yeah, that person who's now part of theater history was my intern."
Yeah.
So that was when Anita and I first met.
Well, you're both part of theater history. I'm honored to have both of you here. I mean, very, very much a part of what has shaped our culture, I think, in many ways. Anita, what you do is slightly. It's very different from what Anne does. But you both come from sort of the same aesthetic roots, I think. Is that fair to say?
Yes, yes. After we did Crowbar, Annie produced Father Was a Peculiar Man in the Meatpacking District. Annie, would you like to talk a little bit more about what you did there?
That was a title and a location, not a whole title, right?
It was the title. Go ahead, Annie. I think you could speak to it much better than I would.
Yeah, Father Was a Peculiar Man was the title.
Yeah.
I went to LA and I met a man named Reza Abdo, and he showed me his portfolio, and I thought he was a visionary. And it turned out he was a visionary. And I said, I want to bring you to New York. And he came to New York, and we were just walking around the city. And when he saw the meatpacking district, he was like, I want to do something there. So he collaborated with a writer named Miralani Oglesby. And we did a show that ran for a month that had 60 performers and a marching band over 4 square blocks of the meatpacking district, which we were successful at closing off in 16 different locations with a 120-foot table that went 3/4 of the way down Little West 12th Street. And Anita was in it. And Anita, why don't you talk about your role in the show?
The play was based on Brother Dostoevsky, right?
The Brothers Karamazov.
Yeah,
Dostoevsky's brothers.
Karamazov. Yes, thank you. Written by Dostoevsky. And there was all the characters from that book. And there was Jesus Christ, and he was painted green, and he was holding a cross. And there was Buster Keaton, and there was a lady who gave birth to chickens, and a lot of sexuality, and even the prostitutes on the street would join as well. And we would do it whether it was raining or not.
Yeah, for them, the work was so much easier.
And I luckily was able to play Marilyn Monroe in that production.
Wow.
Yes.
So let's look a little bit at your roots, both of you. What attracted you to this kind of theater? I mean, I know you both of your life stories, so both of you have strong ties to the commercial world. But you've chose to live more. Well, you've lived in both, and theatrically, you've been in the commercial world, and you've also lived in here. But you seem to gravitate towards very non-traditional, what they sometimes call, I hate the word avant-garde, but they call you avant-garde. So what do you think that means, and why do you think you're attracted to that kind of storytelling?
Are you talking to me?
Oh, I'm talking to both of you.
Go for it, Annie.
Well, I actually, I'm just a little bit older than Anita by probably 20 years. Anyway, I started off as a sculptor and came to New York during the birth of the conceptual art movement in the 70s. But my art school education was very much about public art. And I was very inspired by public art and the way these massive sculptures and performance pieces and things interfaced with an audience that didn't necessarily intend to see the work, but was affected by the work. And then shortly after I came to New York, and I was a sculptor and performance artist. And then in 1980, I met Anne Hamburger, and I was actually a performer in her early works. And I was so struck by Anne's visual imagination and by the way that human bodies could interface with their environment. But a big part of the, I kind of say that with outdoor work, your proscenium is as high as the sky and as far as you can see. But I think part of the reason I love doing outdoor work, and I'm really going to be returning to that fall of 2024 with a site-specific piece we're doing in Red Hook with Sarah Gancher and Jared Mazzochi, because I feel like it gives people who wouldn't otherwise come to see something access by virtue of the fact that it's in their location. And so there are a lot of people doing site-specific work who don't care about that. They're like, I'm writing a piece about a bar. I'm going to do it in a bar. I'm writing a piece, about a restaurant. I'll do it in a restaurant. But for me, a big part of the reason I did that kind of work was because I found to be the streets and the outdoors to give us access to all different kinds of people and be so magical. And that said, you can't do that kind of work anymore because we live in a very different world that was affected by 9/11 and all the rules and regulations that govern our lives. You couldn't put 60 performers in a marching band in 4 square blocks of the meatpacking district anymore. I mean, look at the meatpacking district. So, but that doesn't mean to say you can't do exciting work that's available to a broad-based public. So I'll shut up now and let Anita talk.
Well, a similar question to you, Anita, is what attracted you to the specific kind of art and culture that you support? I mean, you actually moved away from being or do you still act? Maybe you do. Do you still act?
I do. Yes, I do.
So there. So you're kind of a hyphenate right now, because what you're known for, or at least what I know you for, is interfacing with commercial real estate people and finding spaces that offer opportunities for artists to create. And that's a very specific thing. Not many people do that. I don't know if anybody else does it. So tell us a little bit about that and how your journey went from playing Marilyn Monroe in a avant-garde piece to realizing that space was a real necessary commodity for our artists.
Absolutely. So without Annie Hamburger, I would not be doing what I am today, because she introduced me to avant-garde theater in New York City. And then I met Reza Abdo, who we would make a play in New York, and he would ask me to go find a space for him in New York. So we did a play in the Diplomat Hotel. We did a play on right across from the Public Theater. And we did another one, I believe it was on 17th Street. And each one of these productions we would do in New York and then travel all over the Europe and then come back and make a new one. And then when Reza died in 95, I started ChaShaMa in his memory. And since I had been looking for spaces for him, I started looking for spaces for myself. And then I started to do my own theater, which was not very successful, nor fulfilling. People would ask me, can I use the walls to hang my artwork? Can I use that room? Can I use that closet? So any empty space that I was able to get, people were asking to use. And so very naturally ChaShaMa grew into what it is today, where property owners donate space to me and then I give it to artists for small businesses, art education, workspace, and presentations.
Okay, let me get back to gallery. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for the background and for the overview. So I guess what I want to ask, I'm dying to ask, what is avant-garde theater? And is avant-garde still avant-garde, or does it? I feel like it's kind of part of the culture. It's just an accepted part of what we do now. What would it take to be for something to be genuinely avant-garde, which means ahead of times? It's I don't know. It's just a little thing, a peeve of mine. What is avant-garde? And do you have any answers for that?
Yeah, I don't think of it in those terms. I never use that word, actually.
It's used around you all the time on the internet.
Well, you know, there are a lot of things that are used around one that you don't use yourself.
Okay.
both good and bad. I had a young artist say to me recently, I think that what I'm doing is a completely new form. And I said, you are setting yourself up if you say that. People have to say that about you. You can't say that about yourself. So, but I just don't think in those terms. I mean, all I think about really is how to support the people I love and believe in. And the people that I love and believe in are artists in a variety of forms who are willing to take risks and who tell stories that I feel need to be told in kind of genre-bending ways. And I work very instinctually with artists, meeting someone, feeling like what their goals and objectives are similar to mine. And then I spend, you know, gosh, at least half my time worrying about how I'm going to get the resources to support them in the way that I need to support them. And what, you know, I mean, this year we have a program where we have 6 work in progress productions that we've done with amazing young artists. I mean, I'm really not exclusively, but very devoted to kind of early career artists. So there's a trans artist named Samora La Perdida doing a musical called Spanglish Shit. And I fell in love with her and I'm supporting her. And then there's another amazing woman, Haitian American woman named Charlene Jean that's got a musical going, and Jared Mazzocchi, who does multimedia work and extraordinary video work and tells stories in completely different ways. And so I have this whole cadre of people. And I think, I don't know, Anita, if you feel this way, but you know, when I met Anita at 18, she didn't have a kid, right? Now, what's funny enough, Anita, I don't even know if you know this, but your son is being guided by Louis, who's the husband of my marketing and development director. Did you know? You didn't know that? Yeah. So Louis Schwadron is. That's also so our paths have intersected in ways that I don't think Anita even realized. But the reason why I mentioned Anita and our kids, I have twins who are 25, is that I feel that my producing style, somebody said this to me recently, I went, oh, you're right, has been influenced by the fact that I'm a mom. In the way that I think about people and want to kind of take care of the whole person, not just give them money and artistic advice. Especially in this very traumatic, difficult time for artists. And Anita, I don't know if you feel that like the fact that you're a mom has kind of influenced the way you interface with artists, or if you've ever thought about it.
Interesting question. Do you have an answer, Anita?
Being a mom, does it affect the way I deal with the artist? I have never really thought about that. I think the way it affects me is the more the choices I make in my own life and choose the things I'm able to do because I am a mom. The time constraints it makes in your life and the energies where you have to put your energy. But I've always been a very nurturing person, and it's not something that I don't think it affected how I treat people or the way I see things towards artists.
So I'm curious, Anita has spoken about the influence and the impact that you have had on her, and she said that she probably wouldn't be doing what she's doing if it hadn't been for you. What is it that interests you about what Anita's done? And I'm sure you're very proud that she's gone on to do the accomplishments that she's made. Has any of that changed your thinking?
You know, I just have great admiration for Anita, because there are many people out there who have dreams about starting companies. And there are even those who go beyond the dreaming phase and like make companies happen. But there are very, very few people who have the savvy, the vision, the commitment to actually start a company and make it last the way Anita has, with the absolutely unbelievable impact that it has on artists across the city. And so I feel like, you know, that's an extraordinary thing. And it takes, you know, it takes resilience, it takes stubbornness, it takes weathering failure, it takes dealing with disappointment but not paying attention to it. I mean, nobody lasts the way I have and Anita has. Even though I've gone through 2 incarnations of En Garde Arts, as you know. People may be confused about what you said about my commercial. I took a 9-year break. Talk about how kids affect you.
Yes.
You know, when I had my twins, I went out to LA and ran a global division for Disney for 9 years and was the artistic.
That might be considered commercial. Yes.
Yes, well, that's what I mean. But I feel like my roots, my soul, my heart is En Garde Arts, not Disney.
So that's interesting to me.
Just to complete that thought, I mean, I think, you know, Anita, it's extraordinary what you've accomplished and how many years you've like kept it going and vibrant and thriving, and it makes an incredible contribution to the artistic community throughout New York. So, you know, that's pretty fantastic, you know.
But this raises what you said raises a very interesting question in my mind. What was it about your resume that appealed to Disney that they brought you on? Because it seems like what you had prior to that was so far from a commercial aesthetic or a commercial way of doing things. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you know, here's one of those things that was somebody called me. I would never call, you know, but after I got the job, the search firm said, Annie, you're a change agent. They were looking for a change agent. They knew I had a lot of connections with the New York theater community. They knew I was an entrepreneur and I knew how to start a company. I mean, they probably wouldn't have hired me if I went directly from En Garde Arts to Disney. I remember I had a year at La Jolla Playhouse in between as the artistic director. And so I think actually the story is quickly, the guy who was the chairman of theme parks and resorts had spent, okay, everybody hold on to your seats, $20 million on a parade. That was a huge flop. And so Michael Eisner, who was the CEO of the company, said to this man, Paul Pressler, you should not be the place where the buck stops artistically. You need someone to work along with you, to be the person spearheading a program where theater artists are being brought into the parks and giving new life and definition and creative vibrancy to work in the parks. But I really think when Disney hired me, they were like, you know, nobody gets a contract. So they were probably like, you know, we'll give her 6 months. If it doesn't work out, we'll fire her. I mean, it's a very Machiavellian place.
Well, I have to say that it does sound like, from the corporate point of view, it might have been considered risky, but I'm glad that they took the risk. That's
me too. There's
something good about them.
Most people who are my age, I'm turning 70. I can't believe it. I kind of go, how did that happen? But most people who are my age have quit. You know, a lot of people have quit. And people say to me, why haven't you quit? And
I'm
I said,
still
well,
here.
you know, yeah, I said, well, I took a break for 9 years. I mean, that's why I'm still, so I'm filled with energy and enthusiasm. I don't know if I still would be if I hadn't left.
So I want to also mention to the room that I'd love to hear your questions, and if we touched on things and haven't given you as much information as you'd like, let us know. So put your questions in the chat, or you can do a virtual hand raise. I'd like to keep you engaged and involved in this conversation.
Bob, do you mind if I ask a question?
I'd be thrilled. Go ahead. Go for it.
Hey, Anne, I've very much enjoyed everything you've had to say so far. And I just wanted to ask that last comment that you made about not being sure if you would have the same optimism if, you didn't have all of this behind you. What would you say to people that are very early in their careers and are looking at the landscape and intimidated, not quite sure what to do, in all the unknowns that are surrounding all of entertainment, really? And do you have anything that you would say to those people?
Well, yeah, I would. I think when you're starting out, it's really, really important to find a mentor. I think that's key. Someone who you share their values, you look up to them, they've accomplished certain things in their career. I actually think it's important to have a mentor in all phases of your life, but especially when you're starting out. And then, get to know them. I think also, there are people that all they do is knock on doors. And they're not very particular about the kinds of doors they knock on. That's a huge mistake. If you're going to knock on a door, you need to make sure that the person who I get crazy things sometimes from LinkedIn, like, do you want to finance my film? It's like, dude, do your research, I mean, so you need to make sure you understand the community and can identify with people who share your same aesthetic. I would say those are two important things. And it's not for everybody. I mean, it's a tough, difficult life. And I've wanted to quit a lot, but I never do. I always find a reason to keep going. So
well, thanks for that. I think that's very and I think that's a pretty good answer to your question. Anita, do you have any advice that you would want to give somebody who's starting out in theater, given the new environment? And the other thing I want to say is there's a lot of stuff going on right now. A lot of not-for-profits that are closing and or cutting back, and there's a lot of strikes going on with the unions. You don't necessarily depend on union people for your productions. Are you non-union at En Garde Arts, or do you?
We use Designers USA, union directors, usually SDC. Sometimes we work with equity and sometimes we don't. Like, we have a series that we do in my backyard for early career artists, which, Anita, you should come to. You get a big kick out of it. August 16th, next one. So I hire guest curators. What we do it once a month, and we have the guest curator gets early career. Three early career performers to do short excerpts of stuff, and then it's like pay what you can, and we have wine and popcorn and chips, and people get to try shit out in the backyard of my Brooklyn brownstone. So
I can see from the questions that people actually want to know a little bit more specifics about the kind of work that you do, but I wanted to ask you another question, both of you. We talked about this the last time you were on this show. We talked about the impact of shutdown in terms of what you were doing, what you were able to do. And I believe at the time, weren't you doing was it called Dreamscapes? It was
a dozen dreams. We did
a dozen dreams.
dreams.
A dozen dreams, yeah, down in the financial district. What was it during, because that was we were still in shutdown and you were able to do that. Tell us a little bit about how that
It
worked.
was, yeah, it was, yeah, I mean, I'm very stubborn, in case you haven't figured that out. And when all the theaters are closing, I was like, screw that, I know how to do this. So I worked with Irina Krushalina, who's an extraordinarily brilliant designer and conceiver, and John Eisner, who former artistic director of the Lark, and we commissioned, and Anita came. Anita, you came, and we asked 12 writers, what are you dreaming about right now? And they were like, well, when I'm sleeping or when I'm awake. And we were like, whatever you want. And then Arena, and then Arts Brookfield gave us a 4,500 square foot empty space. And then Arena did the most beautiful designs, and we had the playwrights had to communicate their dreams in 3 minutes. And we put them on an audio recording, and we had headphones, and people walked through 2 at a time. We had booties on the headphones, so it was safe, and people could only walk through with people who were in their pod, and we let people through 5 minutes at a time, and so there were only 24 people maximum, and we pulsed it through like a museum exhibition. We even had commercial producers, because it got such a beautiful review in the Times, who wanted to take this to another space, but we couldn't find affordable space anywhere. That's why what Anita's doing is so damn important, you know.
So the thing that's interesting about there's many things that are interesting about that. It seems to me that you found a way of maintaining your aesthetic, because it sounds like it's consistent with what you would do even if we weren't in a pandemic. So you actually found a point where you could actually work your magic during the shutdown. Now that we're back to normal, has the shutdown at all affected the way you think of things and the way you do, or any ideas that you have now?
I mean, I want to give Anita a chance to talk about what she did first. Or what'd you do during the pandemic, Anita?
Yeah, I took as many spaces as I could and activated them with performances on the inside. So when people walked by on the street, they would have entertainment.
So is that one of the things that we put under the heading of street theater, or no? This is storefront theater. And can we define terms just for people so that they know how to talk about this?
So basically, I'll give you an example. The artist, he's a nightlife artist, and he does beautiful headdresses. And he took all his beautiful headdresses and put them in the window, and he created this beautiful backdrop, and he would perform with the headdresses for people walking by with his body painted. And we were told to close it down because there was too many people out in the street watching it. That one. Somebody else did dance. We had Sir Shadow do poetry. So it's we like to call it window performances, is what we
window performance.
That's how we term it. And for the young gentleman who asked about what would be advice for starting in the beginning right now, I would say floss your teeth. You can thank Julie Atlas Muse for that, because you want to have good teeth. No is a step closer to yes, and listen to your intuition. It's very important. ChaShaMa has just rented the new Ohio Theater on Christopher Street. And we're renting it out at a very reduced rate because we have to pay. First time we've ever had to pay rent on something because all our spaces are donated. So we're working with Liz Fleming, who will be producing a theater that is made for blind people.
And how is that done? How is that accomplished?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know yet. Okay.
I'm going to be meeting Liz for the first time very soon. And the other thing that we're doing that I'm very excited about is something I've been working on for many years, is the calling. When ChaShaMa had space on 42nd Street, We did a fire show that I helped direct.
Were we seeing an excerpt from that when we were at your event?
Maybe.
Because I know that a whole bunch of people came in with torches and
Oh, yes, that was Flambeau. Yes, you did see that. Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, I see what you're talking about. Yes, yes. So I did it many years ago, and because it was illegal and the fire department was not involved, we had a great article in the Post. We had a line around the block to get in, and I shut it down because I was scared. But now we're trying to do it again. Fire Spectacular, which we've been working on for quite a while.
Owen, do you want to actually pull some up? Well, actually, I want to let you know. Anne Phelan says she was part of a Facebook discussion last week where a bunch of theater people claimed the most important, influential play they'd ever seen was Crowbar.
Wow.
So, I think
Wonderful.
that's something you should know.
That's wonderful.
RK Green wants to know, can you discuss the benefits of using alternative spaces for presentation, but also the drawbacks, if there are any drawbacks? Ken Burry, let me mute him. Give me a second. Okay. So yeah, so what was I just asking before I was interrupted?
You were asking the difference between doing theater in a regular spot as opposed to doing theater in an untraditional locations.
I mean,
the drawbacks and the pluses for each.
Yeah, well, obviously one of the advantages is that the kinds of work that you want to do really can only be done site specifically. That you wouldn't actually conceive of them for a traditional theater space, I don't think. You said it earlier that one of the things you want to do, Anne, is bring theater to people in their area, in their environments where they live, so that they can have an opportunity to see things they might not be able to see otherwise. Other than that, what are the advantages that you've found over the years to doing this kind of alternative theater versus using a black box or a proscenium?
Yeah. I mean, I think I mentioned it that artistically, it can be very exciting to you. I mean, what we say is we use the city as our stage, to be able to have human bodies and interact with architecture and the kinds of unusual spaces one might be able to find. It can really turn theater from into an event, into a major event, which I'm always kind of drawn to. But I'm also doing things in theaters now. But when we do things in theaters, we always look for ways to take the work outside of a theater. Like we did a show in 2014 at BAM called Bass Track Live. That was about the impact of war on veterans and their families. And it was a multimedia show with a 4-piece electroacoustic band on stage. We took it to 40 cities, but we also took it to Fort Hood in Killeen, Texas, where we performed for over 3,000 soldiers. So for me, that's like another, when you do site-specific work, you can't really tour it. I mean, you can't really, you're starting over again. When you do work in theaters, you can tour it. So for me, it's not one size fits all. I mean, we did a show called Fandango for Butterflies and Coyotes, which we did at the La Jolla Playhouse. Every night we took the entire audience out on the patio and had them participate in a fandango, which is a celebration of music and dance. And then after the 4-week run of the theater, we took the show out into community centers and schools. So for me, it's all about all these various ways of getting to the same goal of busting open who our audiences are and how they interact with and come to perceive and understand work.
So let's talk about from a dollars and cents point of view. What are your savings in the way you do shows, and what are your additional costs?
with the work I mean, I work differently than Anita, because, you know, when we do one major show a year, and we generally mostly we pay for the whole thing. Sometimes we do presenting, but mostly we are producing. It's much more expensive and complicated to do site-specific work. There's no good reason to do it. It certainly is not. There is no good reason to do it from financially. Like I think, you know, the only reason you should do something site specific is because it's an integral part of your vision. Otherwise, stay in a theater. You have a roof, you have lights, you have sound, you have seats. No one's going to steal your stuff because you have doors that lock. You have front of house. I mean, it's much better from a logistics point of view to be in a theater. That's why they're made and built. So if your vision is that you must do it in the street, you must, you know.
Well, let me ask you this: how do you get? What kind of contract do you use if you use equity actors for any of these?
We've used, we are not on like a letter of agreement or any of that. We use different contracts depending upon the show. We've used guest artist contracts, we've used off-Broadway contracts. You know, I mean, back in the day when we did these wild, wacky stuff, Anita, we didn't have any equity actors, did we? Did we pay attention to equity? I don't think so. I can't remember. I think we did at Crowbar. Remember Crowbar? We wanted to.
Did we have a cot in the theater?
Yeah. You remember what happened with so Crowbar was such a huge hit.
Yeah.
That it was written up in the London Times. It was all this. So we decided we wanted to extend. And they wouldn't let us extend unless we put like 10 more people on equity contracts. That's how you got your equity card, Anita.
Yes.
That's how Anita got her equity card. Because we wanted to extend the show because it was such a hit.
Well, this is another question that comes up for me. Generally speaking, equity actors can only perform in equity approved spaces. So if you're, how do you get?
That's not true. That's not true.
I read it all the time.
Equity actors, BAM's not a. Oh, wait a minute. There's spaces that equity has jurisdiction over, and then there's spaces that equity approves. Those are two different things.
Okay, so
equity has to come in. If you're in a church, they have to come in and go, oh, is the HVAC okay? Do you have two means of egress? You know, they come in and do all that health and safety stuff. But equity actors can perform in places that are not, that equity has no jurisdiction over. So there are those two things. But I want to know from Anita, because Anita, you present the work, right? So you work very differently with artists than we do, and you do many more artists because you're presenting. How many
presenting
artists?
It's like hosting. It's like you're the host.
Well, no, it's more than that. But how many artists in a year then do you work with as a presenter?
We were reviewing it, so it's about 3,000 artists a year currently. That we are to.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
I think like, Annie, you were asking about the price of theater, doing it in an unconventional way. I have seen many artists that do not need lights, sound, or any of those things. And they're creating beautiful things that are interacting with audiences that just walk by, and they could use something as simple as a noodle or follow the leader or throwing a football, and creating that contact with other individuals is to me, that's one of my more favorite types of theater that I have seen that ChaShaMa has presented, is inviting passerbys that would never go into a theater, and they go into something draws them in, and then they experience a very interactive theater in the moment, and really opening up their world in a way that they would never expect, and with very little money and very little. It's just the vision of that artist.
Yeah, that's different. Yeah, we work differently in that way. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's just one type, because there's so many different ways to do avant-garde, theater in the streets, or you could think of, like, I don't know, the living theater, right? They really are out there. Or, there's what's his name? The Reverend Billy.
Yeah,
right? And
Yeah,
he's
that-
really he's really out there. He's just singing in the banks, and he's really like doing it. So there's a lot of this very there's political theater that people are doing, and then
that's
there's
true. That's true.
very clown kind of theater that people really like. We have this lady, she has something called the House of Holy Humor, and she's writing to me every 3 months. She's like, do you have a space for me to have the House of Holy Humor so she can just dance with people that are walking by?
So
There's
And do you pay those people, Anita? I mean, how does that all work? You pay-
ChaShaMa, we get all different kinds of grants. Last year we gave $100,000 in grants. So it varies. You know, the value of the spaces we have are 13 million. So we give space grants in about $13 million, and then about 100,000 in monetary grants.
I want to go back to
Yeah.
something you said. You said that you had 3,000 artists over a year's period. Is that 3,000 unique performances, or is that how many?
So the
how
way
many...
it breaks down, we have workspace for artists, and then we do education classes. So the workspace is about 200, right, per month. And then we do 150 shows a year of presenting. And then we have an upstate residency program where we give space to artists, and there's dance, and there's theater, and there's music, and there's visual art, and a writer, and they all come together. So it's like all the different components, and we've expanded to upstate New York. So we're in Syracuse and Rochester. We've just opened a beautiful space in Salamanca, New York, with working with Native American Indians. I can't remember their names. I'm so bad with names. I'll think of their names. But yes. So yeah, it's about 3. We just and it's probably a little bit more, but we give we have a great performance space. It's called Anita's Way in Times Square.
Yeah, that's where I was for your honoring
So
of
right now
Stewart.
we're having shows there nightly. We're about to do opera there, and we have music and spoken word.
So Owen, let's go through the who have we missed? Who have I missed?
Sure, we have a question from Tita, and from Tita. Where did that go? It was here for, give me 1 second. Here we go. Anita, what kinds of performing events do you have in CHA storefronts now? About 7 years ago, you helped launch my son's wood furniture / sculpture work with trees that were not cut down.
What kind? So my motto is, you dream it, we'll make it happen. So pretty much anything that you can dream, we will give you a space for. We have a lot of visual art shows, opera, theater, dance, music, video. So yeah, really almost anything that you can perceive and make, we will do.
So because I'm a writer, and that we have a room full of writers right now. From a writer's point of view, would you say that the opportunities you offer are for pieces that are more experiential, or is it equally doable to bring in a narrative piece, a traditional narrative piece, and find a way of doing it in a site-specific way?
Yes, we have locations where we've had theater, like on 23rd Street. That space has been used as a theater. There's no windows. It's soundless. You're away from the street. So there are and people bring in a whole light pack and seats and stuff. So there are opportunities to do traditional theater, or more traditional, untraditional but traditional theater in our spaces. Yes.
Well, I guess the other part of that question would be to both of you. Many of us are writers that are used to writing narratively, and we're used to writing structurally in a way that may not, that would probably be perfectly comfortable on a proscenium stage or in a black box. What would you say to us in terms of how should we rethink things if we wanted to try more experimental theater? How would we do that? What would our toolbox look like? Do we want
would-
narratives?
It would be your vision, right? And your desire to do something outside of a black box theater would drive it, I believe.
Yeah, but you know,
Yeah, I mean, I think certain, like, the thing that I mean, I work very, very differently from Anita. So we, commission a show from the ground up, and sometimes it'll take us 3 years to put a show up. And we work with a very limited number of artists that we work with over time, where we'll have a 1-week workshop or a 2-week workshop or a 4-week run. So I guess compared to Anita, what En Garde Arts does is more conventional, I would say. Generally, some of the artists we work with are early career artists, but then quite a few of them are also mid-career artists also. And even those terms get very blurry because, what am I? I keep wanting to get a tattoo that says always emerging, but I'm too chicken. So, but, I think that's the wrong question, Bob, because
okay, well, all right, then help me.
because I think, the only way it makes any sense, and it's a little bit what Anita said very shortly, like, what's your vision? But the only way it makes any sense to make a work of art is if it keys into a story you want to tell in a way that you want to tell it. So for somebody to try to say, oh, I'm gonna try to do this differently because maybe somebody will produce it, I think is really, to be blunt, ass backwards. I think there are people that are naturally drawn to multi-genre theater. There are people that are, even with directors, I find that some directors are highly visual thinkers and other directors are very text-based and text-oriented. But, with narrative work, I've always said, if you fight the site, it will win. Like, if you really want to do something that's narrative-based for large numbers of people, and it's narrative based, I mean, you have to have a sophisticated sound system if you want to do it for 10 people, and that's what makes sense to you at a time, then you don't need any of that stuff. So it really depends on what the vision is and where you want to take it. But it really has to come from the inside out.
Well, I would say I asked the right question because I got answers that were very helpful. So
Okay.
yeah. I guess you're both of you are so used to the world that you're in that you don't realize that a lot of us are looking at this and going, how do I do that? What do I do? What is it in me that I could express through the resources that you guys are offering? And you gave us a couple hints. One of the things that you said was we need to think more visually. We probably need to, I'm sure there's no black and white, there's no absolute answers, but we probably need to think a little bit more visually and a little less narratively in terms of text-based. You're saying that there are ways of solving the text-based issues, but it's an environment where, I mean, we're talking about an environmental experience. Anita, for those of you who haven't experienced it, I was at an event that Anita produced, and basically there were characters that were fully made up and fully in costume, who like you couldn't help but notice in the crowd, and they were basically they were posing and they were being actively engaged or trying to actively engage with the crowds. And you also had that fire show that came in where everybody came in doing in costumes and doing the fire. I mean, there was no narrative basis to it. It was visual and it was experiential, and I actually enjoyed it. But I guess I'm struggling. I'm struggling to find out how I can open a door to some of the people in this room that they would be able to walk through with some comfort.
I will say something. I think narrative is not only text. And I think that's a really important exercise that could be opening the doors to people. I mean, there are many ways to tell a story, and text is only one of them, and sound is another, and light is another, and music's another, and your body's another. That's doesn't mean that you're abandoning a narrative. It means that you're looking at narrative in a different way. I don't even want to say unconventional, but narrative is about all those different genres and opening up, I think, for people who are looking at, oh, how could I tell my story differently? I mean, that would be an interesting exercise to think about, like, you know, how can you tell it besides just, you know, besides text? I mean, I'll give you one quick example, which is there's an artist I'm working with on 2 different projects named Jared Mazzocchi. I don't know if you know Jared's work, but he did amazing work during the pandemic. And he's a video designer, and he's a creator, and he's a storyteller. And we're walking down the street one day, and he says to me, I don't know if you knew this, my mom worked for NASA. And I said, no, I didn't. And he said, yeah. And, you know, she was supposed to go on board the Challenger. And the reason why she didn't go on board the Challenger was because she and my father had sex, and she got pregnant with me. And I said, oh my God, that is an incredible story. You should bring that to life, Jared. So he didn't sit down and write a play, right? Jared is somebody who thinks very visually. He thinks with video. He thinks with objects. So we gave him a $2,500 commissioning fee, and we found him space at the Jefferson Market Library, and he brought us together with his wonderful director named Ayot Gawa. And we did this presentation, work in progress presentation for 50 people. And Jared told the story of his mother, who didn't tell him till he was in high school that she was supposed to go aboard the Challenger. And the way he told the story was personally speaking text, but he also did amazing things. Like he had a television behind him. He had an overhead projector from the 60s where he was encouraging the audience to interact with him by putting certain things down. And then the thing he did that blew my mind is he was talking about outer space, and Christy McCullough, who died in outer space, the teacher, and he literally held up a bowl, not like a glass, but a bowl in front of his face. And it looked exactly like an astronaut's helmet. And it was so extraordinary. And this is a person who, you should look up his work. I mean, he's a genius at knowing how to tell stories, both from a narrative perspective and a visual perspective and a video. And he brought in amazing video that he did, and he had video on his face, you know, TV behind him. And I mean, and this project, I'm going to follow along for probably 2 years and try and get it up in New York and have it go to different places in the country. So, you know, I am very envious of Anita that she got, you know, in a lot of ways, my God, you know, but, you know, full disclosure, it's true. But, you know, for me, like working very intimately with a creative team like this, and then watching this thing blossom and having 50 people experiencing it in its infancy, and then being able to take it along for the next year or more even, you know, I mean, this is, that's what I know how to do, you know.
Well, that's enormously helpful. I mean, from an artistic point of view, for me as an artist, you've actually answered my question in many, many ways. I'm sure there are other answers to it as well, but I still don't think it was the wrong question.
That's okay. I'm sorry I said it was the wrong question. I know that must have hit a sore spot. I didn't mean
No, actually, I
adore you, Bob. I think what you're doing is amazing. You're like, you also are one of those people where, like, you know, like, why the hell are we still doing this? And you're plowing away all the time, serving the community. I mean, you're just a beloved person in the theatrical community.
Well, thank you.
So,
and I'm not sensitive. I'm basically, one of my jobs as the moderator is to say wrong things so I can be corrected. I mean, it surely is. I'm never bothered by it. It's like,
okay, I'm sorry.
No. I have
to tell you something funny too, which is like, so I have this funny story. So my husband has a a stepbrother who he's like 20 years older than, or 30 years older. And he kind of watched him grow up. And when he first met him, he was so much younger than him, right? And then he said that one day they were there and he felt like his younger stepbrother shouldn't mow the grass. And this is for you, Anita, okay? And he said, well, and then all of a sudden he looked up and he realized that he was 6'2". And he was like, oh my God, because I grew up with this person and they were small when I met them. He didn't live with his stepbrother. All of a sudden he looked up and there was this full-blown adult who was 6'2", and he went, shit, I'm still thinking he can't mow the grass. And sometimes I feel that way with Anita, like she's this extraordinary woman who's accomplished all these things, but I met her when she was 18. So I still think of her as this kid, and she's this extraordinary human being because I met her when she couldn't mow the grass, right? So
Oh, that's
anyway.
for sure.
For all we know, she still doesn't mow the grass, but
She
you know,
probably doesn't.
but she does other things very well. Are you guys okay with a little bit more time, or because I only committed you until 6:30? I know
Yes.
there are other questions in the room. I just
Go ahead.
Sure.
you can. Okay, Owen, try to find some more of the questions. There's some
Sure.
very interesting things in the chat.
Here's one from Tracy Swedlow. Is anyone doing avant-garde political theater anymore?
I think yes, but they don't call it that. I don't think they use those terms. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who are working at the intersection of theater and social justice. I think the shock nature of what these amazing people did, like the Living Theater, you know, that I don't see the true. I mean, Anita, I'm sure sees much more of it than I do because you work with, you know, generally, you know, a different, I don't see a lot of, I don't go into a space or go to a place where I see stuff where I go, oh my God, that's shocking. But I also think it's so much harder to be shocked, right? I mean, what haven't we seen at a certain point? I mean, we're not even shocked by like 15 kids getting their heads blown off today, right? I mean, sorry to get negative and
Did that happen today? I didn't read that.
And no, I'm just saying.
Oh, okay, because it could have. It easily could have.
In today's world, we've seen nudity. I mean, it's almost like it's almost like, you know, what's rape on video game. I mean,
this goes back to my questioning.
It's like, what's shocking, you know? Anyway,
this goes back to my question about avant-garde. I don't know how anybody can comfortably use the term avant-garde anymore. I mean, what haven't we seen? What hasn't somebody explored in theater that can actually be new? You said that earlier about you had somebody that you knew who was saying, oh, I'm doing something that's never been done before, and you said, oh, don't say that. Let somebody else say it. Don't ever say it, because it's true. I mean, I'm old enough to see a whole generations of people rediscovering things we discovered in the 70s and thinking it's new. It's like, all right, it's new to you.
I think fire is one.
Oh,
using fire in theater because it's so difficult. And people who do political things now are Reverend Billy. I believe a lot of our clown actors can be, even though they're kind of funny, they have a political slant to them usually. So the House of Holy Humor and Mr. and Mrs. Clown. So those are some of the people I think who do more political things.
Reverend Billy is like he does a lot of this shopping.
Yeah,
the Reverend Billy, the church has stopped shopping.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
but I think, you know, great writers like Lynn Nottage do political, you know, theater, and bring these very disturbing, impactful stories to life. The question, you know, I always say there's three different questions, really. It's like, what's the story, and then where is it, and who is it for? So, you know, while Lynn Nottage does, I mean, I don't know if she'd call her work political, she'd probably say it's social justice and where those two things bleed and don't, right? But then, you know, what Anita's saying is, you put fire on the streets. I mean, Lynn did do a site-specific piece in Pennsylvania at a train station, so it's all those tricky things that are, where is it? How is it? They do plenty of things with fire in Vegas, right? But not in New York, so it's all very complicated.
So Owen,
think.
keep digging. Let's find some of the unanswered questions.
Sure, here's another one
these-
from Anita. Why
Yeah.
do locations let you use their spaces despite insurance and other risks? For example, what benefits do you sell?
So when we go into a space, if you have an empty space, it becomes a negative space. If you have something going on, it's a positive space. It beautifies the neighborhood. It's easier to rent out. People want things that other people have. We act as a maintenance man because we're keeping the things running. When you're in a place, it's just much nicer. And we have 5 million general liability insurance that we are able to give each one of our property owners.
Oh, so you can umbrella the insurance for the different spaces.
Yes, we have a $5 million insurance plan that for each space.
Oh, for each one.
Yes.
Oh,
we
so
have 41 locations, and each space we have insured.
okay. And Anne, in terms of your site-specific work, does that raise any questions in terms of insurance?
Yeah, I mean, we had to have 5 million when we did 2 different projects with the Downtown Alliance, and we had to have $5 million in insurance to cover we did a festival called Downtown Live that was 9 different performing companies over 2 weeks in 3 different locations, and then another one, Downtown Stories, and had to have 5 million in liability.
So insurance is in almost any production is a line item. So it
has to have to have an insurance, and you have to pass fire codes and all that stuff. It kind of also depends on how many people you want to have come in. I mean, live theaters, I think, Anita, correct me if I'm wrong, but live theater tends to be trickier than like visual art, where you're hanging something on the wall because you're dealing with people coming and going and audiences, of a certain scope. But I think it's 78 or less.
72.
72, you only need 1 means of egress. But remember, then that's 72, including the cast, including the people that run the show, including the audience. So the minute you start to, get into larger numbers, it becomes immensely more difficult. Like there's a wonderful space in Red Hook that's struggling right now called the Coffee Street Studio. Amazing, beautiful family. Andromaki Chalfant is a designer, and the Chalfant's Kathleen is a well-known actor, and her
oh
husband.
my God, yes.
and we did a workshop with them, and they don't have HVAC, so they can't do anything if it's too cold or too hot. So, and HVAC can cost a fortune. So,
well, I'm actually finding much of this very useful and very interesting. Who else have we missed, Owen? I know that
Looks like we have a question from Stephanie Schwartz. Do we need a new definition of avant-garde?
I think we need a new term. I just think the term avant-garde just feels very old-fashioned to me.
I mean, there's downtown theater. It seems like a lot of the theaters are called downtown theaters,
Yeah, for some reason or other, for downtown theater is an equally old term, but to me, that feels perfectly comfortable. Downtown art, downtown theater. It doesn't always happen downtown, but it's an evocative term.
Yeah,
I think
I'm
RK
gonna
has
I'm gonna have to hop off in just a minute.
Okay, so I think Judith Binus is asking if you fund all of your projects with grants. I guess Anita has already said that she gets a very generous amount of funding. How does En Garde Arts do in terms of funding?
Yeah, I mean, ours is a combination of individual philanthropy, foundations, and government. Yeah, and I'm always looking for more. I'm always worrying about not having enough. And yeah.
Well, with everybody's,
I don't know, Anita, how many, I'm just curious, Anita, how many staff people do you have? You have such a sprawling, impact in all these different places. Yeah. Oh, you're
oh
on
no, no,
mute,
no.
sweetie.
I muted you because you were, you were on the phone before.
Good. I have a staff of 25 people.
Holy shit, wow.
I have a staff of 3.
Yeah, that's amazing. So,
How about you? How big is your staff, Anne?
oh, I have a much smaller staff. I mean, what we do is we have 2 full-time people. We have a part-time permanent general manager. We have a business manager. Everybody else we hire on as consultants. So we go from tiny to balloon. During the pandemic, we gave work to over 200 people, but they're all consultants. So again, completely different model.
Well, I think we've covered a lot, and I think it is only fair that I let my guests have dinner.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna say a few words of thank you to Anne Hamburger and Anita Durst for being with me today, and for being. We're not close friends, but you don't see each other that often. But I think of you as friends, and I'm very grateful to know you. So I want to just say to everybody out there that if you want to be part of the room, and if you want to ask questions and you want to be part of the conversation, which I really encourage, it's not hard. I'm very accessible. Just email me at trunltd@aol.com. And we'll send you the Zoom link every week, and you can come into the room for the conversations that interest you. I also started this as a community service. It still is a community service, but it was a response to COVID back when we were quarantining. And it's always been pay what you can, meaning that anybody that didn't feel that they could afford to pay could come for free. That is still the case. However, since we're going into the live world again, we have expenses that we haven't had for 3 years. I mean, we have to do venues and other things that cost money when you're in a live presentation and live programming. So if you want to help us out, don't let me stop you. We're at TRU Donate, trudonate.org. It's trudonate.org. Go and give us a gift, or when you come to our meetings, pay a little something. We have very small and very big amounts that you can pay, whatever you're able to do. So I want to thank you all for being with us today. I want to thank my community for showing up every week. Good Lord, 166 weeks. How have you all done that? And I hope to see you again next week and in the weeks to come. So that's it for me today. Thanking everybody for being with us, and thanking my podcast viewers and my YouTube watchers. Actually, it's my podcast listeners and my YouTube watchers for being with us. And do stay with us and do become part of the community. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's great to talk with you, Anita. Don't get that much
Yes, lovely
of a chance
to see you, Annie.
to do it. And Bob, I appreciate being on your show as always. And everybody,
you both are
stay safe. Stay safe from the heat.
Oh my God, it's horrible out there. Oh my God.